Wrestling had never seen anything like Bam Bam Bigelow. Standing at over 400 pounds, he disproved all notions of what a huge man might accomplish in the ring. There was no denying his charisma and unparalleled athleticism. Despite his flamboyant exterior, the man had a difficult existence, both professionally and personally. The protagonist in this tale was a man who devoted his life to wrestling but ultimately became a victim of his own obsession. A member of a rough working-class family, Scott Bigelow spent his formative years in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Both wrestling and football were his strong suits in high school. And it's no surprise, as he used to frighten his adolescent opponents with 350 pounds. Asbury Park streets were reportedly haunted by his dreadful presence, as he supposedly chewed someone's ear off and got into fistfights. He worked as a bodyguard, bouncer, and bounty hunter while he was in his early 20s. During this time, he spent 6 months behind bars in Mexico after claiming to have been shot in the back. Bigelow realized at a young age that his life was getting out of hand, but he had a revelation while watching wrestling on television and realized that it may be his ticket out of his mess. Among the best wrestling schools in the United States at the time, Larry Sharp's Monster Factory was in New Jersey, where he enrolled. It was evident he was exceptional from the start. He adapted to wrestling like a pro, and his coaches were amazed by the feats he pulled off, considering the size of the man. Those now iconic flames were tattooed onto his skull during his time in training. Following his training, Bigelow debuted professionally in Texas for World-Class Championship Wrestling, portraying the character of Krusha Yurkov, a Russian heel. After that, he went on to wrestle in the Mid-South and eventually worked for Jerry Lawler in Memphis. He loved becoming famous in the US, but Japan was where he had the most early success. Because Japanese fans love to despise Americans, it's no surprise that they were impressed by his agility. The World Wrestling Federation, WWF, approached him shortly after his 1987 return home to marry Dana. He didn't waste any time inking a deal with them. His defensiveness and relative inexperience were noted by Bruce Pritchard. Bam Bam was like a lump of clay, raw and malleable, but only with the right tools and a solid base. It was probably too much for Bam Bam, I believe. Prior to meeting Larry Sharp, he had been accustomed to working independently. I believe Larry likely drilled the message into his head, trust no one. I believe Bam Bam had that notion in his mind without any evidence to support it. There was a plot in 1987 when Bigelow first appeared on television, when the heel managers of the WWF vied for his services. Surprisingly though, he declined each one and instead revealed Sir Oliver Humperdinck to be his manager. Nobody anticipated that this intimidating man with the tattooed skull would turn out to be a kind guy. Thus, this swerve recast Bigelow as a babyface, which was meant to surprise the fans. He continued to dominate the show by consistently defeating jobbers and proving himself in battle royals. The big man was in for a surprise from Vince McMahon. In order to take use of Hulk Hogan's influence, he paired Bigelow with Hogan as a tag team partner. He debuted on pay-per-view during the Survival Series. Andre the Giant pinned him after he had been extremely dominant throughout the match. Bigelow had a stellar first 3 months, but things weren't exactly going swimmingly behind the scenes. Even though he never gave a clear reason, Andre had developed a strong dislike for Bam Bam. Something Bigelow became smug on stage as a result of his early success with the company. This would have upset Andre no end. Afterwards, rumors started circulating that Bigelow had a defensive mentality, which together with his gruff and rugged persona caused friction in the locker room among the wrestlers. In addition, Bam Bam disliked being apart from his family for extended periods of time and was beginning to experience homesickness. After that, he hurt his knee, which had a devastating effect on his fighting abilities. By the end of 1988, Bigelow had already made up his mind to quit the WWF. This initial stint concluded with his rematch with Andre at Madison Square Garden when he made his final appearance for the WWE. In his autobiography, Bret Hart claims that Andre severely injured him during the match. "Damn near killed him," he said. Bigelow returned to Japan after his time in the WWF and quickly became a celebrity there, collaborating with wrestling greats like Antonio Inoki. Working for New Japan, which had a more relaxed work schedule and more compensation than the WWF, rekindled his love for professional wrestling. Upon his return to the United States, he began working for a number of small promotions, while also making brief appearances in WCW. Andre the Giant was back in his corner in the Universal Wrestling Association, where he had previously worked. Bigelow and Andre became fast friends despite Andre's history of brutality towards Bigelow. Not only was he older when he made his triumphant comeback to the WWF in late 1992, but he was also much wiser and at ease with himself. His fresh, level-headed optimism astonished several of the wrestlers who remembered him from before. In November 1992, he returned to the spotlight with an appearance on Superstars. At the Royal Rumble, he defeated the Big Boss after being reintroduced as a heel and destroying a slew of jobbers. The WWF's pairing him with Luna Vachon this time was a stroke of genius. She gave his heel character a whole new depth. In the King of the Ring event, Bam Bam lost to Bret Hart in the final. In a highly competitive six-man tag match at SummerSlam, he and the Head Shrinkers took against a Tanker and the Smoking Guns. However, his rivalry with the infantile clown Doink was a huge letdown. There was a horrible elimination match with many Doinks at the Survivor Series. But when he joined Ted DeBoss's $1 million company and became one of its biggest performers, things turned around. Bob Holly and the 1-2-3 Child defeated him and Tatanka in the championship match of a tournament that sought to determine a new tag team. The match was just the beginning, though. The loss of Bigelow made football player Lawrence Taylor, who was at ringside, giggle uncontrollably. This infuriated Bigelow, who subsequently shoved Taylor to the ground and got in his face. Thus, an eventual showdown was set in motion. The true purpose of this was to arrange up a male-on-male match at WrestleMania 11. Because of Bigelow's impeccable safety record, he was handpicked to wrestle Taylor at WrestleMania. Despite knowing he would come out on the losing end of the encounter, Bigelow was really thrilled to have the chance to collaborate with Taylor, as he was a huge fan of his. Initially, the plot had a lot of people thinking it was true. The angle was further supported by Vince McMahon's on-air apology and suspension announcement, which added credibility. Just under 12 minutes went into the WrestleMania bout, and Bam Bam performed an outstanding job of bringing Taylor to the finish line. The match went well, and Vince was apparently overjoyed, complimenting Bigelow on his performance. Consequently, Bigelow should have been a permanent main eventer at this point, but that never came to pass. The claimed culprit here was the Clique. Bigelow defended Chris Candido from the men who were harassing him backstage. This was great for Candido, but disastrous for Bam Bam's career. According to Kevin Nash, the boys had been very into him until he spoke, but they betrayed him like a pack of dogs. Bigelow felt the relentless oppression of the Clique, as did many other WWF performers at the time. Bigelow eventually negotiated an early termination of his WWF contract due to his extreme frustration with the scenario backstage. Bam Bam proved he didn't require the WWF, therefore in reality Vince McMahon lost. He returned to Japan to an enthusiastic welcome after a successful career on the independent circuit. He had an amazing encounter with ECW. He became a member of the trio in 1997, joining Shane Douglas and Chris Candido. His next victory was the title of World Heavyweight Champion. After inking a hefty deal with WCW in 1998, he made an immediate splash when he attacked Goldberg in his debut match. Everyone in the company thought Bam Bam would become a superstar. Nevertheless, it was exceedingly challenging to shatter the glass ceiling at WCW, and it was the only position he ever played in upper mid-carder. Although he did experience brief triumphs, the physical toll of years of wrestling was taking its toll on him. He developed an unhealthy dependence on opioids, which had devastating effects on his health over time. However, his descent into depression began with his divorce from his wife. The rescue of 3 children from a New Jersey house engulfed in flames made Bigelow a national hero, but the incident burned 40% of his body to a second degree. He was already carrying a heavy emotional burden, and this made it worse. He persisted in his wrestling career on the independent circuit following WCW's demise. However, his usage of painkillers had already had a disastrous impact at this stage. Because of his severe OxyContin addiction, he had to give up wrestling for good. He tragically passed away in January 2007 from an accidental overdose at the young age of 45. Another great performer who was tragically cut short at an early age due to the wrestling industry was Bam Bam Bigelow.